Unlike Clint Eastwood's The Good and the Bad and the Ugly that's set in the desert, this is going to be about the Carolina Hurricanes through the first 16 games of the season with the team being off. So what is the good? What is the bad? And what has been ugly for the Carolina Hurricanes so far this season? We'll talk about all of that on a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes.
You're Locked On Hurricanes, your daily podcast on the Carolina Hurricanes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to the Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you to the Everyday for making us your first listen of the day. 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, talking everything about your Carolina Hurricanes. I'm your host, Zach Martin. I'm the credentialed Carolina Hurricanes beat writer over at the Hockey Writers, also the co-host of the Surge Guest, and all my duties here at Locked On Hurricanes. And thank you for helping us be part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we are now the number one sports podcast network. Like I said on today's show, we're going to be looking at the good for the Carolina Hurricanes, the bad, and unfortunately, there's one kind of ugly thing to talk about with the team, but thankfully, a lot of it's mainly good, more so than anything else. So what is the good for the Carolina Hurricanes? Well, how about for the fact of the Carolina Hurricanes, like you heard me talk about on the Wednesday show of the pod, they are second in the East, they are second in the Metro, and they are fifth in the NHL. And it speaks to a lot of what this Carolina Hurricanes team has been like so far. You got Sebastian Aho, point per game, Seth Jarvis, point per game. You know, it's one of those things, too, where, Nikolai Ehlers has been on an absolute tear for the Carolina Hurricanes as of late as well, putting up 9 points in over his 11 games, basically since the Vegas Golden Knights. And like I said, you got Jackson Blake playing very, very well for the Carolina Hurricanes, in his second season with the team. You're talking about a guy who's got 12 points right now in 16 games. Like I said, Nikolai Ehlers has got 10 points in 16, 9 over the last 11 games. Like I said, Jarvis is basically almost point per game at this point, 15 out of 16. Sebastian Aho point per game because he got an assist the other night. So he's, 16 on the point category. So he will gladly take that. And you got a lot of the depth scoring. You got Logan Staykoven, Taylor Hall, Karen Jamila, Alexander Nikishin. Still a plus 14 on the team, which is, first on the Hurricanes. Mike Riley, who's came in, is a plus 11. So you kind of see where this team is at right now. And you get the goaltending, too. How about for the fact that, Frederick Anderson, 5-4 on the season, 3 goals against average in 892. It's, it's okay for the most part, in terms of at least, it's, there's a lot of teams around the league that are in a tougher situation. Brandon Bussey, 4-1, a 2.6, goal against average at 898 save. How about Peter Kochetkov, 2-2, 147 goals against and a 938. So far the Carolina Hurricanes have been looking pretty good so far. Now, Caden Primo has played 3 games, none of them with the Hurricanes, but he is 2-1 with a 4.3 goals against in an 838. So all things considered, the Hurricanes have gotten a lot better in their goaltending. In terms of the depth-wise. They have a lot of good goalies they can lean on. And overall, you're talking about a team who's 11-5 on the season with dealing with so many injuries. You're still without Jacob Slavin since the Philadelphia game. You lost Shane Gostisbehere twice. Kendra Miller was hurt, and you got him back. Now Jalen Chatfield's out. Now Charles Alexis Legault is out. And then you're also without Eric Robinson and William Carey for a bit too. And so you're having to dig deep into your depth. You're talking your 13th, 14th forwards and Mark Jankowski and Bradley Nadeau. You're talking about your 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th defenseman. Even your 12th defenseman is up right now with Gavin Bateruther. And you had to go down to your 3rd goalie at one point because Pierre Kochetkov was out as well. So the depth of the Carolina Hurricanes, I think, has been what's good for this team. I think the good really is just the tenacity, the next man up, pulling on the same rope mentality for the Carolina Hurricanes, where you have a lot of guys that have been, stepping up, for this team. Sean Walker is almost averaging 24 minutes a game. You're seeing Alexander Nikishin playing well over 20 minutes a game as well. And first in rookies and second among all NHLers with a plus 14, and doing this mainly on even strength, not really getting a whole lot of power play time. So It speaks a lot to, I guess, the different mentality you're seeing from the Carolina Hurricanes. You guys heard me talk about on the Wednesday show. It's the fact that they're not really taking any BS from anyone. And also, too, it's a team that it feels different. It feels like that there's another level to this team. And, Shane Willis said it, too. Once the entire roster is back healthy, then that's where the Hurricanes are really going to click on all the cylinders. But they're still finding a way to get the job done now with all the injuries. Like I said, you're 11-5. You're fifth in the entire NHL, second in the Eastern Conference. That says a lot. Like, other teams would probably be struggling without having three of their regulars on the defense or having so many injuries that you're reaching into your 11th and 12th defenseman. Who knows how many teams can say they can reach and grab into the depth of their 12th defenseman. I know it's Gavin Beard that hasn't played yet, but it's still saying something to the fact that you had to call up your 12th defenseman on your depth chart to come up. Like, not a lot of teams have to go that far down, but the Hurricanes have had to do that. And, they've made it work. So it says a lot about the Carolina Hurricanes as a whole, to where depth has come on really strong for them, and the fact they've kind of made it work on their own, favor, and have found a way to stick within a point of New Jersey for first in the division, first in the Eastern Conference. So I would say, where would this team be right now if it wasn't for, whatever this new mentality is of, like, you're seeing Jordan Stahl, sticking up for Jalen Sheffield. He hasn't fought in 8 seasons. You're looking at Logan Stankoven, who's never fought ever in his career, and he goes up against Martin Verivari because, he was trying to go after Jackson Blake in a scrum where Nick Dowditch or goalie and Sean Walker's getting in his face. It's, even Charles Alexis Legault didn't want to get pushed around, and, he, takes care of Robinson. He fights, Bobby McMahon. It's just, that's what you've seen a lot this season, is that these guys aren't afraid to stick up for each other, and they're going to make people answer the bell now, because we've seen it every season so far. It's, there'll be a team that, won't retaliate or, won't, I guess, fight back in a sense to where it's, you're taking dumb penalties. But, now it's like they're not really taking dumb penalties. It's more so, hey, we're not going to let you push our guy around. And I think it's, they're adopting what you've seen from these other teams that win Stanley Cups. If you're going to mess with one of us, you're going to mess with all of us. And I think that's what you're kind of seeing right now with the Hurricanes, is that they're taking that next step mentally of taking care of business, fighting everyone off. And I think that's what's, really helped this team, having to battle these adversities too. Like I said, now you're 11-5 on the season. And I think it's kind of the good thing for the Carolina Hurricanes, is that while we've seen deeper teams before, this feels like a team where you are, maybe not as deep as some people think, or maybe you're deep enough where you got the talent to where you don't need to be super deep on a roster, but, injuries have made you have to go deep in your depth, and luckily it's worked out. But there's that sense of mentality with this team that we're going to take no one's BS, and we're going to, shoot the lights on you when, it's possible. And so far they've done it. Like I said, they lost their 4-game winning streak, but this is a team that can get back on one real quick. You kind of just sense that this Hurricanes team is a little bit different compared to others. I think that's kind of the good thing too, where you're not having to worry so much. Okay, where's this team going to be? What's going to happen? Now it's like, okay, it could work. This could be something where the Hurricanes might have figured they might have gotten the right pieces to get it done. Because, like I said, you look at Miller's come on strong recently. Nikolai Ehlers is on a 5-game point streak. He's the only one that's on a point streak right now at 5. And the fact that he's done it too, to where it's like he's playing great hockey for the Carolina Hurricanes as a late, where he's vaulted himself into the top 5 of assists and points in just that span. He went from the bottom to the top, and now we're here type of thing. So I think that's kind of the good thing for the Hurricanes, is the fact that even with the adversity, they're still finding a way to get the job done, and to where you're looking at a team that's top 5 in the entire NHL. And that's a good thing, doing it with the adversity. Like, what does that see when this team gets everyone back together? You get Slave, and you get, Jalen Sheffield back. You get all the guys that you need, and now it's like, okay, now you're just clicking on all cylinders. I think that's a different aspect of the Carolina Hurricanes we're all waiting for, and I'm super excited for that. So I say for the good right now, pulling on the same rope Everyone just doing their jobs, and you're 11-5 and you're top 5 in the NHL. Can't be upset about that. Now, we talked about the good, but I wouldn't say ugly, but what's kind of been the bad for the Carolina Hurricanes so far this season? Well, stick around. We'll talk about it here in a second on a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. When I'm hydrated, everything just works better. My focus, my energy, mood, even my skin. That's why I've been using DripDrop. It's a doctor-developed hydration that keeps me running at full power no matter what my day looks like. DripDrop isn't your average sports drink. It delivers 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of leading brands using a science-backed formula trusted by medical professionals, firefighters, and over 90% of top college and pro teams. And the good thing, too, is they also have 0 sugar flavors as well if you don't want to have any sugar at all. It actually tastes pretty amazing. My go-to flavor right now is watermelon and the peach, but I also kind of like the passion fruit. I think it's really good as well, and they have so many different flavors. And right now, it's becoming my secret weapon for staying sharp, energized through long days. Hydration really has become a non-negotiable for me. DripDrop helps me feel sharper, calmer, and honestly just feel better overall. So right now, DripDrop is offering podcast listeners 20% off your first order. Go to dripdrop.com/promo code LockedOnAHL. That's dripdrop.com, promo code LockedOnAHL for 20% off. Stock up now before the heat hits hard, or basically when the weather gets a little bit cooler and you need to stay sharp somehow. But basically keep your body and mind performing better at their best with DripDrop. Welcome back to segment 2 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. So we talked about the good, basically talking about where the Hurricanes have battled through adversity and finding a way to get the job done and still be top 5 in the AHL despite all the injuries. That being said, the bad, well, it's pretty much all the injuries. Last season we didn't really see a whole lot of injuries for the Carolina Hurricanes. Obviously, unfortunately, we did see some with, Seth Jarvis missed 7 games last year. Aho missed a little bit as well. You did see Sean Walker and Jalen Chatfield both get knocked out of the playoffs for the Carolina Hurricanes. So unfortunately, they weren't really clicking with their entire roster come the Eastern Conference Final against the Florida Panthers. But that was a very short thing. It didn't last long. You didn't have so many guys out. This time, however, it's almost like you got to laugh at the pain or just the sheer craziness of it, is the fact that the injuries are killing the Hurricanes. The injuries have been brutal to the Carolina Hurricanes so far this season. Like I said, you haven't had Jacob Slavin since the second game of the season. Like, he played against Philadelphia, and now he's missed the last 14 games. And we're still getting that he's still a little ways away. And it's like, you don't know when you're going to get him back. You unfortunately lose Charles Alexis Legault for 3 to 4 months because there was a bunch of, torn tendons in his hand after his hand got lacerated on a skate blade from Robertson during the fight with McMahon. So you lost a really good defenseman who was playing really well for you, Legault. You get Shane Gostisbehere, back, injured the same game, comes back for a second time. You were without Kendra Miller for about 6 games. Jalen Chatfield's on concussion protocol. You know when you're going to get him back. Carey and Robinson were both out. Pierre Kachekov didn't come back until the Rangers game last week. And it's just, you're dealing with all these injuries. You're dealing with, at one point you had a bunch of NHL regulars out. 3 guys on your defense. You're losing 2 forwards. You're having to use, Mark Jankowski or Jesperi Kotkaniemi on the wing. You had to call Bradley Nadeau, who looked pretty good so far, I would say. And you're just looking at all of these weird scenarios where you're trying to figure stuff out, and you're just trying to go from there. And it's just, unfortunately, is what you have to do to kind of just tread water if you're the Carolina Hurricanes. And like I said, you're looking at the defense where you had to go Legault, Nystrom, Fensore. Now you got Gavin Bayreuther up as a healthy guy. You have Mike Riley as a +11, and you thought he was going to be your 7th defenseman. And he's played a lot of games this year, and honestly, he's looked pretty good. Like, he's putting himself into a contract situation of maybe someone's going to give him more money in maybe multiple years, or maybe the Hurricanes like, hey, we want you to come back and see what happens. Who knows? But And then you got Brandon Bussey, who's already won 4 games for you, and he wasn't even on your roster at at training camp. Like, he came after training camp, wins 4 games for you because Peter Kochetkov is out, and you lost King Primo to waivers to the Maple Leafs, and now he's with the Chicago Wolves, and now you're running with 3 goalies because you've got to make sure that your goalies stay healthy. Frederick Anderson had to be taken out of the game against Washington because of a spotter took him out of the game because they thought maybe they thought they saw something, and that's why you keep Brandon Bussey up, because you also don't want to lose him to waivers, because the minute you put Bussey on waivers, someone's going to take him, and right now you definitely need, I think he's done enough for the Hurricanes. Don't want to get rid of him. So essentially, you're running at 3 goalies, and depends on how long Anderson's out for, with the concussion. Or I don't think it is a concussion. Who knows what it is? But the spotters took him out. So, we'll see about that. But, you're going to need him too as of right now. Because, like I said, you don't want to lose him to waivers. And, with the health of Anderson and Kochetkov throughout the seasons, maybe you do need a 3rd goalie. And so far, he's done that. So I think that's been the bad for the Hurricanes, is where, yes, the good of you're still winning games despite the adversity. But the bad thing is, you're having to deal with the adversity of all these injuries. Yeah, you would rather, if you had to deal with it, you want to do it now in October, November, stuff like that, where you don't want to have it happen April, May, June during the playoffs. Yeah, you don't want to deal with a bunch of injuries then. If you have to deal with it, you would preferably have it at the beginning of the season, but you don't want injuries. You don't want to have guys out, because you want to have your full roster with you so you can, know what you're going for. You're building the chemistry instead of having to jumble lines up. You're jumbling defensive pairings. You're gonna figure out your goaltending situation depending on what it is. So yeah, while it's good that the Hurricanes are battling all of this and finding ways to win, they're also having to deal with all this, and that's just kind of tough if you're the Carolina Hurricanes, is the fact that you have to deal with all these injuries. We're 16 games into the season, and like I said, you've had to dip down to your 12th defenseman, your 14th forward, and your 3rd goalie essentially. And it's just, I don't know what kind of voodoo or curse or whatever has been put on this Hurricanes team, especially the defense. But my goodness, someone needs to get rid of this thing, because I have never seen a team battle with so many injuries like the Canes have had. I mean, I know a lot of teams have had seasons where they've had a lot of man games lost, but that was like in the middle of the season or something like that, or towards the end, or maybe it was like one guy or 2 guys are out for a long time, and maybe you get a sprinkle of guys here and there. But man, the Hurricanes have been dealing with so many injuries, and it's crazy where it's at right now. And hopefully it kind of ends soon, because man, I don't know how many, Tim Gleason's probably pulling his hair out because he's got to figure out his defensive pairings and penalty kill and stuff like that. It's probably driving Rod crazy, because now he has to, reshuffle defensive pairings. At one point, you had to reshuffle the lines up because he's trying to figure out what the best course of action is, because you're having to go down to your AHL guys, or you're having to figure out who should go where if one guy's slumping, or, maybe you need to provide a spark on another line. So now I would say, while we're talking about the good of this team battling the adversity and still winning, the bad is they've had to battle the adversity with the injuries. So I wouldn't really say there's anything bad going on with the Carolina Hurricanes outside of just the injuries, because, like I said, they're 5th in the NHL. They're 2nd in the Eastern Conference in the division. I don't really think there's anything necessarily bad for the Carolina Hurricanes outside of what the ugly is that we're going to talk about in segment 3. But outside of that one thing, the only real problem the Hurricanes have been dealing with is just the injuries and just trying to overcome all that. So hopefully it ends soon, because I'm telling you what, I'm tired of being like, all right, what are the lines going to look like? What are the pairings going to look like? Okay, how long is this guy going to be out for? Okay, who do we need to bring in from Chicago, or however you play it, man? It's just all this craziness hopefully stops soon, because you want to see a full Hurricanes roster. You want to see what you got and signed up for this season. So hopefully all the guys come back healthy, not going to want all the injuries stop, and you kind of just go on from there. So I guess we'll see when the time comes, but right now, yeah, the bad is the Hurricanes are having to deal with the injuries, but the good thing is they're still winning despite all that. Now, all that to say, what is the ugly for the Carolina Hurricanes? Well, stick around and we'll talk about that ugly here in a second on a Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making the late push. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So, head to FanDuel.com and sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Welcome back to segment 3 of Locked On Hurricanes, your team every day. All right, so we talked about the good, dealing with the adversity, still winning games. Talk about the bad, the team having to battle the adversity of all the injuries that are going on. But what is the ugly for the Carolina Hurricanes? And really, there's only one true ugly thing for the Carolina Hurricanes, and that is the power play. It is atrociously bad. 31st in the NHL, 12.5%. They are now 6 for 48 on their power play opportunities, but they've scored 6 goals, and their net power play is luckily 12.5% because the team that's worse than them is the Calgary Flames, who are 7 out of 61. So, yeah, the worst team in the league has had pretty much almost roughly 20, close to 20 more power play opportunities than you, 61 to 48. Really, it's about 17 more power plays, 13 more power plays, really quick math. But they have been scored on shorthanded twice, so their net power play percentage is 8.2. That's pretty much about it. Power play time on ice per game, 5 minutes and 9 seconds, where the other team has had, 3 minutes or so. But while the Hurricanes have been averaging 5 minutes of power play time, they are only 6 for 48 on their chances, and that's why they're 12.5. The crazy thing is that when you look at the penalty kill, the Carolina Hurricanes are actually 10th in the NHL at 81.8. And the thing is, they've let in 10 power play goals on 55 chances. Not terrible, but their net average is 85.5% because they've scored 2 goals on the shorthand. So the Hurricanes do have that in their favor to where even their net PK puts them still actually tied for 9th with the Chicago Blackhawks. So PK-wise, they're 10th. Net PK, still 10th, but technically 9th because they're tied with the Blackhawks. So that's the crazy part for me, is just the discrepancy with the fact that your penalty kill is still 10th in the entire league and you're shutting the opponents down. But however, your power play is second to last in the entire league when you're going 6 for 48. And the only thing is, the reason why Calgary is so bad, despite having more power play goals, they've had 13 more power play opportunities. That's crazy to me for the fact that they're actually tied for third in the league with Anaheim and Dallas in terms of their power play percentage. But the thing is, Anaheim and Dallas are 11th and 2nd, Dallas being second on the power play with that many opportunities. Now, for the Carolina Hurricanes, they are, unfortunately, with their opportunities, they are 20th, like they're 20th, essentially, on their opportunities. That really says something for the Hurricanes, to where they are in a very tough spot where you're 20th on the power play opportunities with 48, but you are second to last in the league on the power plays. But you have a team that's had 13 more opportunities than you, and they're dead last, even though they have 1 more power play goal than you. But just because of percentage-wise, they're a lot worse. I don't know what the deal is. At one point last year was top 10, top 15, and then in December through The beginning of January wasn't great, and then between January 1st and the playoffs, 3 power play goals. Like the Hurricanes power play went down to 25th last year after being in the top 12, top 10 for most of the season to start out. And then you go 3 for a bajillion through January to the start of the playoffs, and then somehow you scored 10 power play goals. Like, sure, that makes sense. Yeah, a struggling power play that you're kind of worried about goes and puts up 10. Like, they basically tripled their number in a span of in a month or so. But right now, it's bad. It's ugly. That's why it's in the ugly category of the good and bad and the ugly. And I think that's really the only ugly thing for the Hurricanes. They got scoring, they got defense, they got a good penalty kill, goals against average, goals allowed per average. The Hurricanes are doing all they can do. The only bad thing is the penalties. The penalties are bad, but mainly it's the injuries that are really killing this Hurricanes team. But it's the power play that's the ugly. It's the only ugly spot on this entire roster or in the entire arsenal of this team is the fact that they just can't score. And that's the crazy thing, like I said, because you got Calgary at 7 out of 61. The Hurricanes are 6 out of 48. Even the Rangers are 6 and 43. The Jackets are 6 out of 40. Like, those are pretty bad numbers, but they're over 14%. The Hurricanes are 1% better than the last place team in the league in Calgary, and that's only because of the fact that Calgary, like I said, 13 more opportunities. The Hurricanes are not getting a lot of opportunities. Like Rod Brindamore said it a while back. The discrepancy of how many power plays this team gets. Now, recently, over the last few games, they've gotten a lot more, but at the start of the season, they were hardly getting any penalties to get the power plays that they needed. But it's just, something's got to give, because maybe it's putting guys in different, maybe you need a different bumper guy, maybe you have a different guy on the end wall. They were pretty good when they had Stefan Nason go into the crease and getting the greasy goals or the screens and stuff there. There's just not a lot of net front presence for the Hurricanes on the power play. It's a lot of perimeter, a lot of setting up for the one-timer, or just shots go wide or the goalie's seeing it because there's no screens. They're making it easy. It's just, you gotta get net front presence. You gotta get the goalie screens. You gotta have guys crashing the net for rebounds and loose pucks or just whatever. And feels like it's just a lot of perimeter shooting and a lot of setting up for the one-timers. Because, you've seen them score some one-timers on the power play, but it's just, you can't rely on – this isn't NHL 25 or 26 or whatever, all these recent NHL games over the last 4 or 5 years where the one-timer was so cheesed that you could score at will on a slap shot because you could. You can't rely on that in today's NHL. You can't rely on the slap shot to do everything for you, because even Alexander Ovechkin, who is a merchant on the power play, which is standing in his office, even he can't score there all the time. He more so scores on empty netters, but that's a different conversation. My main thing is the Hurricanes have to figure something out, because if you want to be a team that's going to make a deep playoff run, you cannot have a 12.5% power play. You just can't. Luckily there's so much season left. There's so much ways that we have a lot to go still for this season, for them to turn around, but you cannot have a second to last power play when you expect to go win a Stanley Cup. You just can't. You can't bank on scoring 10 power play goals in the playoffs this year like you did last year off of sheer determination and the power of friendship. You really just can't. So, like I said, the good thing for the Hurricanes is that they're winning through the adversity. They're 11-5, fifth in the NHL. The bad is they're having to deal with the adversity because of all these injuries. And then the ugly. It's the gosh awful, gosh darn power play that needs to figure it out. And hopefully they do soon. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. What's your good? What's your bad? And what is your ugly for the Carolina Hurricanes? I'd love to hear it on the YouTube side of things, or hit me up on socials at OneTrueZach and let me know what you feel like is the good, the bad, and the ugly for the Carolina Hurricanes. If you haven't seen the movie with Clint Eastwood, highly recommend. Really good movie, a good classic as well. But until then, guys, this has been the first edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Thank you for making it first today. Go check out the Locked On NHL Game Night show every night until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast. If you want to keep up with me, I'm at OneTrueZach on X. The podcast is LO_Hurricanes. I'm also on Blue Sky, the Zachary Martin, where if you click the link to my bio, you can find all of my random content at thehockeywriters.com. I'm putting out a lot of stuff recently, so make sure to go check that out. If you want to check out my other podcasts, it's the Searchcast on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. For Locked On Hurricanes, we're on Spotify, Google, Apple, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen to your podcast. Make sure to leave a 5-star rating and review because it might just rate it on the show. For YouTube, it's Locked On Hurricanes. Subscribe, hit the bell notifications so you don't miss the show. Hit the thumbs up so you affect the show as well. Share with other Caniacs to become everydayers just like you. But hope everyone enjoyed the Thursday edition of Locked On Hurricanes. Enjoy your Thursday. And until next time, as always, let's go Canes.